The 6 pathways for ECFMG certification. Hello friends, if you're new here, my name is Malki Assad, plastic surgery resident in the US and the founder of the Match Guide, through which we helped hundreds of international medical graduates match into residency in the US. In this video, we will go over the details of the 2025 pathways for ECFMG certification and provide you with all the information and resources you need to know about that. So here we're on the ACFMG website and I will provide the link for this page, and it says the requirements for the 2025 pathways for ECFMG certification. And let's start with the overview. To be eligible to get an ECFMG certification, you need to be an international medical graduate who passed both Step 1 and Step 2 CK exam and have the clinical skill requirement and the communication skill requirement. How can you satisfy this requirement? By passing the OET exam, which is an English language exam, and by applying and being accepted in one of the 6 pathways we will be talking about today. And they're telling you here, in order to participate in the match, in the NRMP match, you have to have gotten your ECFMG certificate before the NRMP rank order list certification deadline. And this date is generally by the end of February or beginning of March. So that means if you are an IMG who wants to match into residency in the US, you need to get your ECFMG certificate, and to get that you need your Step 1, your Step 2 CK, the OET exam, and one of the pathways. You can still apply to the match even if you don't have your ECFMG certificate, but you have to have your certificate before the rank order list deadline, which, as I said, is usually at the end of February or beginning of March. Well, some ask, can I apply to the match, which is usually at the end of September, without my ECFMG certificate? And the answer is yes. However, one thing to keep in mind is that many programs filter IMGs by the fact if they have an ECFMG certificate or not. So even though you can apply to these programs, many programs will not review applications of IMGs if they don't have ECFMG certificates. That's why you should do your best to get your certificate before the end of September. Here they're saying assessment of communication skills including English language proficiency, and for that applicants are required to get a satisfactory score on the occupational English test or OET exam. All pathway applicants, regardless of native language of instruction at medical school or citizenship, must satisfy this requirement in addition to meeting the requirement of the specific pathway. So even if you are a US citizen or a native English speaker, let's say you grew up in the UK, you still have to pass the OET exam if you want to apply to one of these pathways. Now, what are the general eligibility for all the pathways? You should not have already met the clinical and communication skills requirement for the ECFMG certification. And by that they mean you have not passed the Step 2 CS exam, because if you already passed the Step 2 CS exam, you met that requirement and you probably have your ECFMG certificate already. So if you already passed the Step 2 CS exam, you don't need to apply to any of these pathways. You're not barred by the ECFMG. You should have submitted an application for ECFMG certification and have been registered for USMLE step or step component. So this means you should at least be registered for one of the step exams to start the pathway process. So even if you have not completed your step exam, if you have not passed it yet, you can still start the pathway process. But to get the full ECFMG certificate, you need to fulfill the requirements for the pathways and pass both the Step 1, Step 2 CK exam and the English language test, which is the OET exam. And now let's go through the 6 pathways. There is an important note here. If you are an applicant who failed Step 2 CS exam 1 or more times, you must apply to pathway 6, regardless of whether you meet the eligibility requirements for the other pathways. So even if you meet the requirements for pathway 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, you still need to go directly to pathway 6 if you failed the Step 2 CS exam 1 or more times. And if you already passed the Step 2 CS exam, which is already cancelled, you can't take it anymore. But if you already passed that exam, you can get the ECFMG certificate without needing one of these pathways. So pathway 1 is already licensed to practice medicine in another country, and this license has to be without supervision. Let's read a little bit more details about pathway 1. So if you read here, to be eligible for this pathway, applicants has held a license/registration to practice medicine without supervision in any country at any time on or after January 1st of 2022. So this license has to be without supervision in any country. So even if you're, for example, an Indian citizen and did medical school in Ukraine and have a license in Ukraine, that still counts. But this license has to be active on or after January 1st of 2020. They're saying here supervised license or training licenses are not eligible for this pathway. They're saying the date of the initial license can be prior to January 1st of 2020. However, it must be active on or after January 1st of 2020. So if your license expires in February 1st of 2020, that still counts. However, if your license expired on December 20th of 2019, you won't be eligible for this pathway. So the license has to be active on or after January 1st of 2020. And it doesn't have to be currently valid. So even if it expired, let's say in 2022, and now we're in 2024, it still counts. You can still apply to this pathway. Your license should not have been subject to disciplinary action, and you should meet the other requirements for practicing medicine in your country. One important thing about application timing for March 2025 applicants, your application must be submitted no later than January 31st, 2025. And I recommend you even submit it much earlier than that so you can get your ECFMG certificate before the end of September. So when you apply to programs, you already have your ECFMG certificate. But the deadline to submit this application for Pathway 1 is January 31st, 2025. Now let's go to Pathway 2. And I like to group Pathways 2, 3, 4, and 5 under the same umbrella. Because if your school is under one of these categories, you can apply to the respective pathway. And how can you know if your school is accredited by these organizations or part of this pathway? If you click on this link, and I'll provide the link for that in the description of this video, you can see the full list. So here you can see medical schools eligible for 2025 pathways 2 to 5. And you can either search by your country, by your school, or by the pathway. Or you can just type Ctrl F and search for your country. And here you can see the school name, the country, the city, and the pathway number. So if we want to search by country, and let's select India for example, and click next, and you'll see the full list of Indian schools that fall under one of these 4 pathways. Now before we move on to pathway 6, if you're a match applicant and you need help with your personal statement, ERAS application, interview prep, or just general advising about the process, we're here at the Match Guy experts in helping people like you. We've helped hundreds of applicants match into their dream residency programs, and we would like to help you as well. We have multiple application packages: the Silver, which includes 1 edit of your personal statement, 1 edit of your ERAS application, and 1 hour of interview prep; the Gold package that includes 2 edits of your personal statement and ERAS application, 2 hours of interview prep, and 1 hour of advising; and the Platinum package, which includes unlimited edits of your personal statement, unlimited edits of your ERAS application, unlimited access to your advisor on WhatsApp, 6 hours of advising, and 4 hours of interview prep. In addition to match edit guarantee, which means if you don't match, we will continue to edit your personal statement and ERAS application for free until you match. So go ahead and check out the match application packages, and I'll leave the link in the cards above and in the description below. And if you like to schedule a strategy call with our customer support team, go ahead and schedule this free call so you can learn more about our services and how we can best help you. And now let's talk about Pathway 6. Pathway 6 is evaluation of clinical and patient encounters by licensed physicians. If you click on this page, you would get more details about Pathway 6. Here we're on the Pathway 6 page, and first thing is who should apply. Pathway 6 is for applicants who don't meet the eligibility criteria for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, which means if you already meet the requirement for Pathway 1, you have to apply to Pathway 1. You can't apply to Pathway 6, and the same for 2, 3, 4, or 5. So you need to ask yourself, do I meet the requirement for Pathway 1? And if the answer is no, you go to Pathway 2, and then 3 and 4 and 5, and if you don't meet any of these pathways, you go to Pathway 6. If you're someone who failed Step 2 CS exam 1 or more times, you go directly to Pathway 6 even if you satisfy the requirement for Pathway 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So what is Pathway 6? In Pathway 6, your clinical skills will be evaluated by licensed physicians using the ECFMG Mini Clinical Evaluation Exercise, Mini CEX. Now let's talk about the criteria for acceptable physician evaluators and acceptable encounters, because there are specific criteria that need to be met. The physician who evaluates you must agree to directly observe and evaluate you during an in-person clinical encounter, so this should not be virtual. And also this physician must agree to provide this assessment of your clinical skill to the ECFMG. This physician must hold a full, unrestricted license to practice medicine without supervision in the country or the city that this encounter is taking place. And this physician must have held this license for a minimum of 5 years. So if you have a physician who just graduated and has a license for like 2 or 3 years, that will not be allowed. They should share their name and email address with the ECFMG, and they should not be your relative. And they define here what a relative is. It is defined as a spouse, child, grandchild, parent, grandparent, sibling, uncle, aunt, nephew, niece, and or cousin. The physician should not be compensated by you or by a third party to perform these evaluations. And each physician should not submit evaluations for more than 10 applicants for the 2025 pathways. So that's why pathway 6 might be challenging, because you need to find someone who is not your relative, who is willing to evaluate you and spend time, doing these assessments, have you do this on their patients, not be compensated for this, and each physician must do a maximum of 10 students per the 2025 pathway. So if you're planning to apply to pathway 6, make sure you start searching for these physicians now, because it's not easy to find these people. The good news though is that it doesn't have to happen in a specific country. So you can do these assessments in any country in which the physician that is evaluating you holds license. Now, what are the criteria for acceptable clinical encounters? They have to be real in-person clinical encounters. They can be telemedicine, virtual, or standardized patient encounters. They have to take place in a formal clinical setting, such as an outpatient office, urgent care clinic, or an emergency room, or in a hospital. They have to be primary care / general practice. They can be subspecialized. And they should focus on the diagnosis and treatment of acute and or chronic illnesses in primary care settings, such as general internal medicine, family medicine, pediatrics, or OBGYN. The patient should give permission to be observed, and they should occur after you submit your online application to Pathway 6 and after the physician evaluator has accepted your request. So don't do these encounters before you submit your online application to Pathway 6. Another good news is that this could be conducted in the language of the patient. So if you're in Egypt, for example, these encounters could be done in Arabic. However, the mini CEX must be completed in English. And here they provide more information on the ECFMG mini CEX for Pathway 6 and what kind of things need to be included in there, the different scoring system. And if you click on this PDF version, you will see an example of that. Here you can see a sample of the mini clinical evaluation exercise, and here the physician would fill this information: the name of the applicant, the name of the physician, facility name, city, country, the patient age and gender, and the 4 categories that you will be evaluated on. And here is the scoring system. 7, 8, 9 is performance at the level of an experienced doctor / practicing physician. And as we said, each physician can do a maximum of 2 for you. So because you have 6 encounters, you need a minimum of 3 physicians to complete the requirements of Pathway 6. And then after each physician submits this scoring system to ECFMG, the ECFMG reviews the scoring and decides if you pass or not. If you're applying to any of these pathways, make sure to submit your application for the 2025 pathways here. If you click on this, it will take you to the application site, and the deadline is January 31st, 2025. But as I said, you should try to get your certificate before the end of September to optimize your chances of matching. Now, very important information about the ECFMG certificate is the fact that they expire. In the old days, when we had the Step 2 CS exam, once you get your certificate, it doesn't expire. But now, because we're going through one of these pathways, there is an expiration date to the ECFMG certificate. So on the ECFMG website here, you can see the different expiration dates based on when you applied to the pathway. So if you're applying now for the 2025 pathway, your ECFMG certificate expires on December 31st, 2027. If you applied through the pathways last year, 2024 pathway, it will expire in 2026. For the 2023 pathway, it expires in December 31st, 2025. So if you got your certificate through the 2023 pathway, you should be good for this match, because your certificate has to be valid by the time you match in residency, which if you're applying to the match this year, you will match in March of 2025. But I'm sure you're asking, how can I make this certificate permanent without expiration date? And they're answering here: for applicant's ECFMG certificate to become valid indefinitely, no longer subject to expiration, the applicant must meet one of the following requirements: successfully completed at least 12 months of clinical training in the US Graduate Medical Education Training Program accredited by the ACGME. So let's say you got your certificate, it expires in 2026, but you're starting residency in June or July of 2025, and you complete a full year of residency training in an ACGME accredited program, your certificate becomes valid indefinitely. And the other way is successfully completing at least 12 months of clinical education in a US non-standard training program associated with an ACGME accredited program. And this is gonna be the common way for most applicants. applicants. They're mentioning an important notice here is that your certificate might have the expiration date of the year you applied in. So if you're certified by ECFMG based on the 2025 pathway and your ECFMG certificate lists an expiration date of December 31st, 2024, this expiration date will be extended to December 31st, 2027. You will receive a notification from ECFMG that the expiration date has been updated, but they will not issue you a new certificate reflecting the extended expiration date. So if you get a certificate through the 2025 pathway, even though it says December 31st, 2024 on the certificate, you will get a notification from the ECFMG about extending that expiration date, but you will not be issued a new certificate. So it's fine even if the certificate itself gives an old date, but you receive the notification about extending that expiration date, you should be fine. You don't need a new certificate. And another very important point and question I get asked about a lot is the time limit for completing the exam requirement. And here there is a section about that. ECFMG requires that IMG satisfy the examination requirements for ECFMG certification within a 7-year period. So from the moment you pass your first exam, the clock starts for 7 years. So once you pass an exam, you will have 7 years to pass the other exams required for ECFMG certification. And that also applies to the pathways. Your pathway application must be accepted within the 7-year period. So let's say you pass your step 1 exam on January 1st, 2020, and you pass your step 2 exam on January 1st of 2021. The 7-year rule also applied to the pathways, which means you must be accepted in one of the pathways before January 1st of 2027. So even though you passed both step 1 and step 2 CK exam and even the OET exam within like let's say a 3-year period, you also must be accepted in one of the pathways during this 7-year period. Otherwise, your exam becomes invalid. The first exam you took becomes invalid and you have to repeat the whole step exam. So be very careful about this rule, because I totally understand how repeating a step exam is a full nightmare. And if you're applying to the match this year, we have a full list of amazing resources that will help you with your application. From personal statement examples to ERAS application template, MSPE, LORs, interview prep guides, and you can download that fully for free by signing up to the all-in-one match application resources from the Match Guide. And I'll leave the link for that in the cards above and in the description below. And as I said, if you're interested in having professional help for editing your personal statement, ERAS application, interview prep, go ahead and check out the different services we have on the Match Guide website, and I'll leave the link for all these services in the description below. You can also schedule a free strategy call to learn about the different services we have. And by the way, most of our services are 100% satisfaction guarantee, which means if you're not happy, you get your money back, no questions asked. So it's fully risk-free investment in optimizing your chances of matching and acing your residency application. I hope this video provided you with some insights on how to get the ECFMG certificate. If you found any value in this video, I would really appreciate if you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friend who is also applying to get their ECFMG certificate. Now, before you leave, make sure to check out the full detailed tutorial I recorded on how to fill the ERAS application. You can watch it by clicking here. Thank you so much for tuning in, and good luck on your match. Peace.